everyone. Hi. We hope you appreciated the film shown this evening. My name is Wynn Garfinkel. I'm the Manager of Arts and Culture at the Meyerson JCC, and I would like to quickly introduce our speakers for tonight's discussion. Dr. Muli Peleg is a political sociologist who specializes in conflict analysis and conflict resolution processes, negotiation processes, leadership models, and democratic sustainability. He is currently an Israel Institute Fellow and visiting professor to the University of Cincinnati. Previously, he served as the head of the International School at Oranim College for 4 years. Rabbi Sammy Cantor serves as the Director of Jewish Life at the Meyerson JCC. As a graduate from the Hebrew Union College in Los Angeles, he also has a master's concentration in Israel education from the I Center, and he lived and studied in Jerusalem at HUC and Pardes. Questions for tonight's discussion can be submitted via note cards. Please feel free to raise your hand and a volunteer will bring you a paper and a pen. I will now pass it over to Sammy and welcome Muli, and Sammy will be moderating tonight's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Wynn. And thank you all for being here and for staying. I think art at its best challenges us and pushes us, maybe makes us a little uncomfortable, and so I'm looking forward to being in conversation with you, Muli, about this film. So I want to start just by encouraging you to acknowledge what you're holding and what you're feeling right now. I can imagine, like me, there's maybe some discomfort, anger, frustration, questions. I'll say, having the luxury of seeing this a few times in preparation, the first time I remember shock at the ending, and then the other times I've watched it was like this dread throughout the movie because I knew the pain that I was going to feel, and I was afraid of that. So Muli, I'd like to start just by asking where you're sitting, what you're holding, and kind of set the stage for us in terms of what conversation we're going to have tonight, where some of the things you think are important to highlight and for people to know before we really dive in to break down the film.
Hi everyone. What an amazing hall that is. Wow. I just want to mention that this film won the best film in Israel, the Israeli film, last year. And some of you have heard the reactions from some of the members of the government, of the current government. Well, the context of the film is not new, really. The situation has been going on, this situation, for next year, it's going to be 60 years, whereby regular Palestinians find it very difficult to see the sea. So from that perspective, nothing has changed. Some other things have changed with this movie, and I think we'll touch upon it later. But this is, just at the outset, I would tell you that this is an amazing film from my perspective. And the reasons for that, again, will come up in the questions and answers, I hope, that we're going to have throughout this interview.
Thank you, Muli. So to start, I'd like to talk about language and the use of language in the film. Maybe you picked up on the Arabic and Hebrew, and that there was a different color. The Hebrew was in yellow and the Arabic was in white. And communication and communication issues seem to be a through line. I was also noticing the cell phones are used a lot. There's a lot of calls. It's almost like reminding you to wake up to these communication issues. And there's a lot of moments where people can't communicate. And so I'm curious for you to talk a little bit about, Muli, how you see communication playing into the film and what it's trying to say.
It's more a lack of communication or miscommunication. But frankly, I think that the lack of communication here is more of a symptom that lies on top of, I think, a more profound problem here. And this is the sense of estrangement, alienation, and people, the sense of entrapment. People are lost. The father and son crisscross each other, they intersect each other several times. Like, you know, my initial sense was that they are like lab rats in a maze. They're so close to one another, but they can't reach out. And the lack of communication is basically Israeli Jews that do not speak Arabic, and this kid that didn't have any prior opportunity to interact with Israelis, with Israeli Jews. So again, this void, this inability to people to communicate is one of the major outcomes, implications of the current situation, of this detrimental situation that we have between Israelis and Palestinians in that small region, and the abomination of this situation, which really tears people apart from each other.
Well, and I think I'm curious for you to speak on one thing that I noticed is, so the language, for the most part, folks can't communicate, right? Some Israelis are able to somewhat speak Arabic or reach out, but for the most part, there's a block unless the Palestinians were able to speak Hebrew, and it seemed to me that it not only leads to not being able to communicate on a basic level, but then there's assumptions about characters just based on their looks or based on an item that they're holding. And I mean, there's no benefit of the doubt given because there can't be any communication. So I'm curious for you to maybe a few instances where you think that is really poignant or screaming out.
Well, I'll start with just a brief personal story, if I may. Okay, so I was born in Israel, born and raised in Israel, in Ramat Gan, which is a city east of Tel Aviv. And by the way, for me, also the sea was, you know, the place to go to get out of the strangulation that we felt growing up in Ramat Gan. But we didn't have, you know, checkpoints on the way. We just had a very slow and crowded bus, number 61, which was terrible at the time, but nothing compared to this trial and tribulation of this little kid. And this is not the story. The story is this one. In high school, the first time that they thought of teaching us a foreign language, a second foreign language, in addition to English, they taught us French. French. What can I do with French in Ramat Gan? They didn't bother teaching us Arabic. Now, this was not just an arbitrary choice. It has policy behind it. It has ideology behind it. It has attitude behind it. Yes, we are in the Middle East, but we don't belong here. So we should know French because we are Europeans. And Arabic, we let the Arabs adjust to us and they will study Hebrew. Thus, at the outset, you see this sense of they are not on the same par with us. And you saw those two women in the playground, and she was lamenting the fact that they didn't teach her Arabic. I felt, you know, I knew this story. I don't know Arabic until this very day. I caught a word here and there. But with regard to the communication, the attitude, I think that there is still this formal attitude that we don't have to bother and study, you know, the language of the natives. They will get used to us and they will study Hebrew. And that's horrible in my book. That's horrible. It's a matter of attitude, not of technique, but it's a matter of attitude. And this is what happens. You don't have any communication. And this kid, which is It's amazing. He never played anywhere. And he doesn't speak the language, but his gaze is enough. The way he looks at things. Because he is transparent. He is transparent like many other. And you know what, Sammy, I think the main theme here is otherness. Otherness. And how people fear otherness. And there's a lot of fear in this movie. Everybody on both sides. Now, if you notice the cab driver, he's very friendly with the guy he takes for a ride, and then he suddenly hears Arabic. You see his expression changes. There's a lot of fear there. And then the woman on the bus that sits next to the kid's father, also she is very, very weary. She is very, very, the suspense, the suspicious. You don't trust. There's a lot of mistrust. And this is the daily situation where we come from.
Thank you. Well, and as an Israeli, it's an interesting portrayal of Israeli Jews. So I'm curious your thoughts on this, because I feel like often in America we highlight the moments that in Israel, like if you're sitting on a bus and then someone will have you hold the baby on the bus because we're all family and we do things for each other and whatnot. And this is an interesting kind of contrast to that, because I think most people do not assume Khaled is Palestinian. Like, they don't have that assumption. Even the kids, those 3 kids that kind of want to beat him up for not stopping the bus, they don't assume he's Palestinian. They seemingly assume he's Israeli, and yet it's an interesting, from my perspective as an American, an interesting snapshot of when Israelis are open-hearted, when maybe it's kind of a critique of the amount of times Israelis are more closed off. But I'm curious your take on kind of the behavior of the various Israelis we encounter on Khaled's journey.
I think it's a regular behavior because they see a small kid wandering around and they don't have any doubts that he is one of us. I mean, he is just walking around after school with his bag on his shoulder, and they cannot really fathom the idea that a Palestinian kid from Ramallah is lost in Tel Aviv. I mean, it's so bizarre, it's so surreal that you push this thought aside. You don't want to deal with it. And the fact that he's not speaking, well, he's got an impediment, but certainly he cannot be Palestinians. Also, he's got blue eyes. So that's also makes it totally impossible for him to be a Palestinian. You see, we live in a world of images. And I think this is one of the most significant advantages of this movie. This is really the most important, I think, the most important contribution that this film offers to the dialogue between people in general, but between Israelis and Palestinians in particular. Because really the story is not between 2 camps, between thee and thee. The conquerors, the settlers, the territories, the terrorists, the soldiers. It really moves the observation from the categorical level to the individual level. And it breaks the image of the fearful, the hostile Palestinian to a naive, innocent kid who tries to make it to the sea. And I think this is the reason why the Minister of Culture was so up in arms about this film. He banned it, and he said it's a pro-Palestinian. I don't think he saw it, but nevertheless, it's a pro-Palestinian movie. This reaction, this irrational reaction, unbalanced reaction was, I think, because the narrative was cracked. The narrative of the evil other was falling apart when you see this is not an evil terrorist. This is a kid who likes, like any other kid, to get to the sea. And the advantage that the Israeli narrative, the Jewish narrative had so far vis-a-vis the Palestinian violence and terrorism is just falling apart at the seams when you see this kid and his father. Khalifa Matur is an amazing actor. His father is jeopardizing his whole status and livelihood, leaves the workplace, he doesn't have papers, he's illegal alien or immigrant, he doesn't have a permit. And you know, every time he sees somebody with uniforms, he freezes. It gives you the sense of what is the individual human Palestinian experience. And I think the film does an excellent job doing this. By the way, the sea, I don't know if you recall François Truffaut's masterpiece, 400 Blows, when the kid as well, I think the same age even, runs away from his school and wants to get to the sea, whatever means he has. And there is also another Israeli film from the 1990s, I think, Everything Begins at Sea, and also come to my head one of Amos Oz' fantastic films, which is called It's the Same Sea. It's the symbol of the sea as freedom, as the place, the ultimate place to watch the horizon, the future, the hope, this crave, this aspiration to get to the sea, and there shouldn't be any problem, even from Ohio, to get to some sea. But there, even though the distance from Ramallah to the Sea of Tel Aviv is 45 minutes. 45 minutes. It's like Ulysses. It'll take him years and years and decades, if at all, to get to the sea. And this is an abomination. This is sad. It's a sad movie.
Well, and what's even more painful about that are the amount of times we hear that Khaled was almost there, right? He was there in his mother's belly. He hears the sea through the shell. And then this last scene, which I think is just so heart-wrenching, where he's there. He's that road in Tel Aviv where you're right there, you can see the beach, and the glass is between him. And there's a question of whether he'll ever get to see the sea. You know,
that's an excellent point, Sami. By the way, another way that they show that he's almost there, he watches the video that his classmates brought him. Well, so he's always almost there every time, almost there. So your conclusion can go both ways. One conclusion could be, not mine, desperation. He fails again and again and again, so give it up, man. But the other conclusion can be, okay, you make it closer, closer, closer. Next time you'll succeed. Now, here's the thing. Some may see it as a metaphor for the destiny of the Palestinian people. But this is on you. Metaphor is the interpretation. The script is simple. A little kid wants to make it to the sea. The meaning that you give it, the symbolism that you give it, is on you, right? But it carries a lot of weight. It carries a lot of weight, and I think that many Israelis that saw the movie thought that there may be another way to approach this predicament, this crisis. And if this is accurate or half accurate, I think the film was very, very important, essential. Even though the Minister of Culture was angry.
I want to encourage folks, if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand. And I know we have some film festival folks who will come around, and we want to invite you to write the question on the card, and then they'll bring it up to us, because we do want to see what is on your mind. But while you're doing that, I wanted to ask Muli, sticking with the ending, your thoughts on this Tel Aviv cafe and the commentary that might be saying about Tel Aviv folks, and also what might you think happens? The film blacks out. We don't know what's going to happen to Khaled and his father. So what do you think is going to happen in your best guess?
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine. He's going to be thrown to jail, and then he will be, they will drive him to the border and he will get back home. And we don't know if he's going to make it to Tel Aviv again. This is not his first attempt. He was working in the bakery. Something happened there. We don't know. But he's trying again and again. We must realize the desperation of this situation. It's such a dismal situation. You don't have any income. You don't have any possibilities of livelihood. So you have to go all this Via Dolorosa, which entails humiliation and fear, because you need to bring home the bacon. I don't know if it's a bacon, but whatever money you have, and they leave home for weeks on end. They don't see the family. Here again is another advantage to really open a window. Most Israelis are not aware of it. Most Israelis are aware of Palestinian violence, Palestinian terrorism. You stick to the narrative that you find resonating with what you have inside already. We all have cognitive systems, and we have gates to those cognitive systems, and then they don't let in anything that really negates our prior knowledge or our prior assumptions. And I think this is important to show, to open a window to not the other reality, but the actual reality of many Palestinians, hard-working Palestinians. And we need to realize that Hamas, the extremism of Hamas, is not the Palestinian people. It's like saying Ben Gvir is the Jewish people. But this is the grim symmetry of the situation, and most Palestinians would like to make a living and live with dignity. And this is a very important window to Israelis to have a look prior this initial knowledge about the situation of their neighbors.
Thank you, that's helpful. I'm curious, and while we wait for the question, because I know I stuck two different parts. So yeah, the cafe in Tel Aviv.
Well, I know that cafe. That's in Tombito Street. Yeah, I think this is the writer and the director knows his material. He's got this very delicate observations of the Israeli character. Israelis like to live normally, but look, the reality is, the grim reality is that Tel Aviv had several incidents of suicide bombers coming in. So it's frightening. It's frightening. You don't know what to think. You see a little kid and his father humiliated in the streets across the street from you, but you don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. Maybe there is some kind of a concealed weapon. It's such a confusing situation. You'd like, when you sit in the cinema house and you see this, you'd like to run and just hug those people. But for Israelis, it's such a confusing reality. And when they return to normalcy, to their routine, this for me, if you're not Israeli, you think this is odd. Well, they order their cappuccino after they see this humiliation. But this is the routine of living in Israel. You are vacillating between horrendous events and you try to hang on to normalcy. And this is, I think, what is reflected in this scene, that for others, people on Mars, it might look very, very strange. So this is my take on it. This is exactly how Israelis live. They jump from from a horrendous moment to trying to continue their lives with serenity.
All right. So we have hard questions. People are thinking in here. I'm going to kind of paraphrase this question. So one is, someone asks, how is this an Israel film? I'm curious your take on that.
How is that Israeli film?
How is it? Yeah, how is it an Israel film? And then on the same token, do you think the Palestinian population saw this film, was able to see this film, it was shown, and how, if there was any sort of reception to this? That's
interesting. I don't know. I assume that the Palestinians did not see this film. It's an Israeli film because it's an Israeli production. Israeli funds, not government funds. Israeli director. Some of the actors are Israelis. Khalifa Natou is an Israeli actor, Israeli Arab, I think from Haifa. So it's definitely Israelis. And he won the Israeli prize. I mean, if films are not Israeli per se, they cannot be candidates for the Israeli Oscar, the Ophir Prize. But I don't think Palestinians saw that. Several years ago, there was another fascinating movie called Paradise Now. I don't know if anybody saw this. And that was a movie about two Palestinian suicide bombers, not religious, not fanatics, but because of, I don't want to ruin it for you, try to see it. It's an amazing film. But that was a pro-Palestinian movie per se, but it wasn't shown in the West Bank and Gaza either. I don't know what are the rules and regulations there. Unfortunately, I've been to the West Bank only with my uniform on, so I didn't get the vibe of the place. This is another sin because not only that you don't speak the language, you don't get to see and get to know and get acquainted with those people because of the situation. So I really don't know, but I don't think they will see it.
I think it's important I'm just picking up on what you said, that it was an Israeli-made film that, even though it won like the equivalent of the Oscar in Israel, there was pushback from the government. And my understanding from the American side, right, international countries submit films to the Oscars, and there was a lot of pushback from the Oscar community, the film community in America, they didn't want to highlight an Israeli film, when the reality is, this is I would argue, probably the message that maybe some of those folks who resist Israeli films in the American Oscar world, this is a message that would resonate. So that's kind of also this complexity of what it means to be an Israeli film, both in Israel and then the way the rest of the world perceives that.
Absolutely.
So there's a question here in Hebrew, and unfortunately my Hebrew is not strong enough to translate it and do it here, so I thought if you wouldn't mind translating and answering whatever question you want to make.
You don't have your Hebrew, and I don't have my glasses. Anyway, so, lucky for me, I have a long arm. בקשה, משאלה, אולי כדאי, that's a handwriting, that's another issue. אולי כדאי לראות דברים חיוביים. And put on the pink glasses on. את הקשר האנושי, כאשר אנשים עוזרים לחלד לאורך הדרך, וגם את השלום של דתיים מזרחיים ישראליים במקום החברתי בישראל, גם בבני ברק כמו בתל אביב. אוקיי. יותר בקשה משאלה. It's a wish rather than a question. That if it's possible to see the positive things of that movie. I think we mentioned positive things, no? We didn't mention negative things. But beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Yes, I mean, the question mentioned the help that Khaled received from by pastors in Tel Aviv. But the question is, had they known that Khaled was Palestinian, what would have been their attitude? Because when you see a kid, just a kid, naive kid with his school bag, sure you want to help him. But again, signs, symbols, what you wear, what you take with you, I'm not sure the attitude would have remained the same had they known, had he walked around Tel Aviv with a kafia on his head. Let's be honest, right? And again, it's not that, I'm judging people. I don't think this conflict has bad guys and good guys. Just a whole big black cloud hovering above everyone. I never thought that this is really a conflict between Israelis and Palestinians, nor is it a conflict between Muslims and Jews. I always thought that this is a conflict between extremists and moderates. And the sad thing is that extremists every time win the day because they are vociferous, they are armed to the teeth. I'm talking about extremists on both sides, right? And they steal the agenda every time because in the media it's more convenient or it's more attractive for their purposes to show the extremists, the terrorists, the violence. What would you show in the evening news with regard to moderates? People sitting around talking? That's boring. So this is why there is this wrong impression that violence is engaged by the majority. No, that's not the story. But it's not a matter of quantities. It's not a matter of numbers. And the extremists are fewer and fewer. But again, they always manage to steal the agenda. That's a positive thing, right?
Well, and I think just to go along with that, I think another positive in some ways this film is like the people that are just good people going about their lives, regardless of if they're Israeli or Palestinian, are like the heroes in some way. And, I see in this scene when the kids at the beginning, way back then, when the kids are on the bus and they're partying and then they get to the checkpoint. I didn't necessarily see that as a commentary on Israel bad, these Palestinians good, but it was more this commentary on, look at what happens when kind of the state gets involved, right? When the army gets involved, when the government gets involved. That's not to say I'm not trying to diminish the reasons for those checkpoints being there, but that was my take on the soldier is, the soldier doesn't want to be doing that job, right? He doesn't want to be there, and he kind of seems on his face like a bit of irritation that he has to deal with this.
That's a great point. That's a great point, Sammy. Because, the soldier is just doing his job. He is not aggressive, and even you kind of detect some degree of pity when he realizes that this kid is left behind all by himself. And I have to say, for fairness, checkpoints are there for a reason, right? It's not just that the Israeli military was bored, in June 1967 and just walked into the territories and took them. There were reasons. There is context, historical context. However, the way they dealt with it ever since, they think about the 6-Day War as the shortest war in the history of Israel. It turned out to be the longest, still going on. I think that Israel had many opportunities to make amends. Of course, on the other side, there aren't, people who are, the optimal partners. But there's got to be a way. I mean, it's unbelievable. Next year is going to be 60 years to that war and to this detrimental situation that we are facing now. 3-4 generations that never knew what freedom is and never had a smooth ride to the sea.
So we'll just do 2 more and then we'll conclude. Thank you all for sticking with us. So, this person, I'm just going to read the card. It said, "When I visit Israel, I am struck by how invisible and yet simultaneously despised Palestinians are treated in Israeli society. What is the conversation in Israel about the Palestinian experience and the segregation that exists between Israelis and Palestinians?"
Well, I think that this movie is giving us an excellent reply to this. But again, I have to say, the general attitude of Israelis towards Palestinians is not positive, but it's not because of ideology and it's not because of racism. It's mainly because of 2 things that enhance each other: ignorance and fear. Fear and ignorance. And this is the main reason, and this is not from theoretical knowledge, not from my research. This is from my Israeliness. And the only way, the best way, the less complicated way to lower fear and ignorance is to get to know the other. To get to know the other. Because once you think about the other as the gap remains and it becomes an abyss. But once you get together, not Israelis and Palestinians, but Moshe and Musa get together to the same room as human beings, there is a transformation. There's bound to be a transformation of attitude when you get to know, when you yank the person from the box and you get to know him, and suddenly you realize you like the same music, you like the same food, you like the same author. Your attitude and the other side's attitude change. The sad thing is, Sami, that Israelis and Palestinians do not get together as individuals. They get together in the checkpoint or in jails. And if that continues, those negative images will never fade away.
Well, I think that takes us toward the last question, which, kind of tying in what someone else wrote, I'm curious, where do we all go from here? Where, in your mind, we're all going out into the world after this. What should we take with us? What should we think about? And someone also pointed out, I think it's apt to mention, situations in our country that are also maybe guided by ignorance and fear, and that is I would argue, plaguing our nation at this moment. And so how should we all walk out of here from this film? What should we do?
I didn't want to mention it, I'm glad you mentioned it, that the similarities, the analogy between this movie and what's going on here, the fear on the streets, the freeze when you see somebody with uniform approaches, it's very similar. Without naming names or anything like that, but people know. Look, I'm optimistic. I'm a peace activist. A peace activist must be optimistic. Otherwise, it's a waste of time, a waste of energy. So I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic. This is why when I'm in Israel, what I do, one of my fields of expertise is dialogue, intercultural, interfaith dialogue. And what I was doing in the last 4 years is promoting meetings between Israelis and Palestinians, the different walks of life, different professions, different ages, different geographical areas, just to get to know one another. I don't expect them to start dancing together, but just to get to know, to lower the fear. And this is what we need to keep doing, what we need to keep doing. Now, when you ask me, what are we going to do when we go home, we talked about Israelis or about Cincinnatians?
The folks here.
Folks here. Well, first of all, I think it was very important for the folks here to see this other dimension of Israeli-Palestinians encounters. I just hope that this is what happened, because you all saw the same film, but it's not what you see. It's really how you look at what you see. So maybe everybody got a different impression, and that's good. That's legitimate. You know, we see through different eyes. But I think that that we should think positively. We should raise the hope that Israeli-Palestinian coexistence is possible. And more movies like that, similar articles and books, and people with experience that met Israelis or met Palestinians and got a positive impressions should spread the word. And I just want to mention here, I don't know if there are people from my department, but there is a conference coming up in April in UC, whereby Israelis and I think Palestinians as well are going to be there, or at least Arabs from Arab countries, talking about the regional peace agreements, the Abraham Accords, and other things that we can imagine together. So if you have free time during those days, I think it's, I see Matt there. Matt, am I right? 19th to 21st of April? Yeah. So if you're around,
That is correct.
Very difficult for me here to see faces without my glasses. But if you have some free time during those 3 days, I highly recommend that you'll come over and listen to some scenarios of hope with regard to our afflicted area. And thank you for listening to us.
Thank you, Muli. Thank you all for being here, for showing up on a cold night to see a film like this. Thank you to Win and the entire JCC Film Festival team, and I hope you get home safe. Have a great evening.